I hope everyone had a nice lunch. We are still on schedule. I promise you that I will get you out of here by 3:30 today. We're going to pick up where we left off, and I'm going to ask the state to please call their next witness.
So call Petra Henry.
Petra Henry.
Witness come up?
Should be Petra Henry. I didn't see if there was somebody back there that stepped out. Miss Henry, welcome, and good afternoon. If you'll come forward to be sworn anywhere, if you'll face me and raise your right hand to be sworn as a witness. Thank you. Do you swear affirm any testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, sir. Thank you. If you'll follow the bailiff around to the ramp that leads up to the witness chair, please watch your step. When you get to the chair, go ahead and have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. That microphone does adjust.
Okay. Good afternoon, Ms. Henry.
Good afternoon.
If you could please tell the jury your name and spell your last name for the court reporter.
Petra Henry, Henry.
All right, and Ms. Henry, where do you live?
Currently, I live in Williamsburg, Virginia.
All right, what do you do up in Williamsburg?
Since I graduated from Florida State, I've been working at a humane society, the local humane society.
Okay, and when did you graduate from Florida State?
December 2018.
Did you ever go to any other school other than Florida State?
I went to the community college in Williamsburg for my first year of college, yeah.
And then you transferred in on your sophomore year to Florida State?
Correct.
All right. Back in August of 2015, were you still living permanently up in Williamsburg?
Yeah.
Okay.
Until I came to Florida State.
All right. And when was that? When was that?
August 18th-ish.
Okay.
Of 2015.
So August 18th, is that when you were moving in?
It was sometime around there. I think I came down a little earlier because we went down south to visit my aunt.
Okay. So did someone come with you when you
my dad did, yeah.
Your dad?
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall arriving at Florida State?
Yes.
All right. And you said it was the 18th. Do you recall was it morning, afternoon, evening when you first got there?
I don't recall, no.
All right. Did you have a permanent assigned room?
No, I was in overflow housing in Smith Hall because I guess they were out of dorms at the time that I got there.
Okay. Had you submitted an application to live on campus?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
And we had been emailing the director of housing a lot, too.
Okay. But for the time being, they were putting you in overflow housing with the understanding or belief or hope that you were going to get put into permanent housing soon, correct?
Right.
Right. So did you spend that first night, that Wednesday night, in the room?
I did. Mm-hmm.
Who else was in the dorm room with you?
Mariel.
All right. Anyone else with you at that time?
Nope.
All right. Going to the next day, the 19th, what did you do that day?
I had orientation for Florida State, so that started at like 6:30 a.m., and then you were done by lunchtime.
Okay. And did you go back and forth to your dorm room on that day?
No. Left at 6:30.
All right. Did you ever go back to the dorm that night?
I believe I slept there that night.
Okay. Why do you say you believe?
It's so long ago, it's hard to remember, but I think I did, right?
Okay. Had you heard by this point whether or not you had permanent housing?
No.
Okay. When did you find out that you had permanent housing?
The day that I met Nicole.
Okay. What day? Do you recall what day that was?
I think it was the 21st.
Okay. And when did you first meet? And well, let me ask you this: so you know who Nicole Nachtman is?
I do.
And the first time you met her was on the 21st of August of 2015?
Mm-hmm.
You say yes?
Yes.
Okay. And do you see Ms. Nachtman in the courtroom here today?
I do.
Okay. Can you point her out and identify the piece of clothing that she's wearing?
A bluish sweater.
Okay. Record reflects she's identified the defendant, Your Honor?
She also reflect.
Do you remember what dorm you were in for the overflow housing?
Smith Hall.
So that morning when you first saw Nicole, when did you first see her? Describe to the jury what it was when you first saw her.
So I walked into the dorm room, and my intentions were to pack up my things, and because I had got a spot in permanent housing, and I was surprised to see a new roommate in there. She was sitting up on the top bunk. My bed was the lower one. There was no sheets on the bed. I saw a suitcase open and empty on the floor, and she was just sitting up there with a blanket wrapped around her.
Okay. Did you talk to her at all?
Yeah, it was very nice. I introduced myself. We shook hands. I noticed that she was upset, so I asked her what was wrong, and she told me her mom just died. And I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. What happened?" And she said, "I don't know. Detectives are flying in later." And I said, "Okay, well, I understand if you don't want to be around anybody right now, but my dad and my sister are about to come up here to help me pack my things and move into my permanent dorm." And she didn't say anything. She just got up and left, and I never saw her again.
Okay, so that was the only interaction you had with Nicole Nachtman?
Yes.
Eventually, did the police contact you?
Later that day, when I was moving into my new dorm, yeah, I was questioned by detectives, police.
All right. And did you go down to the station to give a statement?
No.
Okay, they came to wherever you were?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yes, yes?
Yes,
Okay.
it was in my dorm room.
And since then, have you had any more contact with Nicole Nachtman or the police?
No.
No further questions, please.
Cross-examination?
Afternoon, Ms. Henry.
Good afternoon.
Now, you were basically a transfer student coming into Florida State from the community college you were attending,
Correct.
and you had not been assigned permanent housing at the point that you arrived in Tallahassee.
I had not.
And this overflow housing is basically for people who either apply late or maybe are low on the totem pole as far as housing goes, and you have to sit in overflow housing until permanent housing becomes available.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your understanding?
Yes.
And the overflow housing that you were assigned was this student lounge or study lounge in Smith Hall that they had basically converted into a temporary room with bunk beds, dressers, things like that.
Yes.
It's not a huge room, right?
No.
At the time you first met Ms. Nachtman, you indicated you showed up in the room from orientation or wherever you had been, and you see that you have a new roommate.
Yes.
And when you see her, she's sitting on the top bunk and has no sheets on the bunk bed,
Correct.
and she's covered with a blanket.
Yes.
You indicated you observed her crying, is that correct?
Yes.
And you obviously, this is the first time you had seen this individual.
Yes.
You also recall her mumbling something or not really being able to make out what she was saying.
I think she was on her phone, so I'm not sure.
Okay. Did you hear anything about the phone conversation or who she may have been talking to or anything like that?
Nope.
When you first observed her, she appeared tired to you,
Disheveled, I would say.
kind of a mess.
Yes.
Poor hygiene,
Yes.
not kept, not bathed, hair a mess, I mean, all of that.
Yes.
You introduced yourself and then obviously asked her what was wrong because you had seen her crying.
Yeah.
And that's when she tells you her mother had died and that there were detectives on the way to kind of tell her what had happened.
I suppose.
What do you mean you suppose?
She said she didn't know how she died, so yeah.
But then she told you detectives were on the way to talk to her about whatever had happened
She
to her
never
mother.
said they were coming to talk to her. She just said they were flying in later.
Okay. And then a few minutes after that, she gets up and leaves and you never see Nicole Nachtman again.
Right.
Now, when I asked you about this mumbling and you indicated she was on a phone, do you recall giving a deposition back in October of 2017 about this case?
Yes.
And do you recall myself, Mr. Terry, I believe, asking you questions about this incident?
Yes.
In October of 2017 would have been 2 years after the incident, is that right?
Yes.
Do you remember, and I'm on page 12, line 10, do you remember being asked the question, did you ever see her on her phone or hear her talking to anybody while you were in the room with her? And your answer, no. I didn't hear her talking to anybody. I might have heard her mumbling some things. I didn't know if she was talking to me or what she was doing. I just kind of ignored it. Question, mumbling like she's talking to herself or like she's on the phone with somebody? Answer, I didn't see a phone. So I'm assuming she was either talking to herself or talking to me. You remember telling me that in that deposition?
Yes, but when I gave my initial statement to the detectives right after, I did say she was on her phone, so at this point in time, I don't remember if there was a phone or not, but I would go with there was a phone because that's what I told police right after.
But at one point you did characterize it as mumbling one way or the other.
Yes.
Nothing you could make out.
Yes.
I can have a moment?
Yes.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you, Ms. Hunter.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused by the state
Yes, you may.
and excused by the defense?
Yes.
Thank you. You may step down and you may be excused as a
Thank you.
witness. I'll ask the state to call your next witness.
Jessica Gilbert.
Jessica Gilbert. Ms. Gilbert, welcome. And good afternoon. If you'll come forward to be sworn wherever you're comfortable, if you'll face me and raise your right hand, please. Thank you. Do you swear any testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. If you'll follow the bailiff around to the ramp that leads up to the witness chair, please watch your step. When you get to the chair, go ahead and have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. You may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
Jessica Gilbert, Gilbert.
Thank you. Ms. Gilbert, where are you currently living?
I currently live in Blacksburg, Virginia.
And are you working?
I am.
In what capacity?
I am a residential learning coordinator at Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University.
Okay. I want to turn your attention back to August of 2015. Were you a student at Florida State at that time?
I was not.
Okay. Were you employed with Florida State at that time?
Yes.
In what capacity?
I was a program assistant with Florida State University's housing department, working in their contracts and assignments office.
And how long did you work in that position?
I was in that position for 4 years,
From when to when?
from May 2013 to July 2017.
Tell us what that job entailed. What were your duties?
So as a program assistant, I was the first point of contact for a lot of students or families that had questions or concerns about living on campus at Florida State, and I did some contract and occupancy management and assigned students to spaces on campus.
The work that you did, sort of talking to parents and assigning students to places, was this work more in person or more through email or telephone contact?
It was a bit of a mixture of both. I definitely saw more family and student interaction in person during orientation season. So from like May to July, that was a high amount of students and families that came in and talked to me. Other than that, most of it was through email and phone.
Did you ever take any role in checking students into housing, or was your role more prior to that point?
Not as a program assistant.
Okay. Back in August of 2015, do you recall having email communication with an individual by the name of Nicole Nachtman?
Yes.
Did you ever meet Nicole Nachtman in person?
No.
All of your contact with Nicole Nachtman, actually communication back and forth, was that all through email or telephone?
Yes.
Turning your attention back to that time, August, July of 2015, do you recall, or in your role, are you aware of phone conversations that were had with Ms. Nachtman and the Florida State Housing Department?
Yes.
And when was that first phone conversation?
The first phone conversation was, I think, in around mid or late July. I don't remember the specific date. Ms. Nachtman spoke with one of our student assistants that answered the telephones and asked about on-campus housing for fall 2015.
Okay. And what do you recall, as of today's date, have you had an opportunity to review documents of those communications that Florida State Housing Department had with Nicole Nachtman?
Yes.
Okay. And is that how you're aware of communication she may have had with people other than yourself, but still in that department?
Yes.
Okay. So if you can, my understanding is that in July, the communication was her asking about housing for the fall.
Yes.
And do you recall what was expressed to her or told to her at that time?
So, to my knowledge, Ms. Nachtman was coming into as a returning resident to on-campus housing, and she had missed the deadline for returning as a returning student, and that contract timeline closed in January 2015, and so she had contacted us needing on-campus housing. We were not able to provide her with a contract right away, and so we added her name to a waiting list. And if we were able to offer her anything, we would contact her via email.
Okay. And what did your records reflect as to when the next communication with Ms. Nachtman was?
The next communication was the week of August 18th. And she contacted our office again and spoke with a different student assistant and asked about on-campus housing. And at that time, she did not have a contract.
Okay. So on August 18th, your records reflect that she again called to find out about where she was on this wait list.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that accurate? The records, I'm sorry, strike that. At that point, you said that, again, she was told she did not have a spot yet. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. When was the next communication with Ms. Nachtman after that?
So she had called the morning of August 18th, and shortly after the conversation that she had with the student assistant, I received notice from my supervisor, Jamie Kirkstra, that we were able to offer spaces to about 5 students for overflow housing. And Ms. Nachtman was in that list, and so I notified her via email around 11:30 a.m. offering her a spot on campus.
And this was on the morning, around 11:30 a.m. on the morning of August 19th. Is that correct?
I thought it was the 18th, but I could have been mistaken.
No objection to the introduction of this.
Okay. Judge, the state's going to move to introduce State's Exhibit number 50.
It'll be admitted.
Thank you. And ask for permission to publish.
You may publish it.
All right. Ms. Gilbert, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you on the overhead there, and you can look to your screen there in front of you. Do you recognize this email, or do you recognize this document that I'm showing you?
I do.
And what does this appear to be?
This is the offer email.
Okay. And have you seen this email prior to now?
Yes.
Okay. We see at the top from Nicole Nachtman to Jessica Gilbert. Would that be you?
Yes.
Okay. And then sort of further down it says on Wednesday, August 19th, 2015, you wrote an email to Nicole Nachtman.
Yes.
Does that kind of refresh your memory as to when you sent her the offer email?
It does.
And is this in fact that offer email that you're referring to?
It is.
This email goes on and it appears that there's some sort of form language in there. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And on the next page of the email, we see that it's signed by Jamie Kirkstra Ropes. Who is that?
Jamie Kirkstra Ropes is my former supervisor. She is the assistant director for contracts and assignments at Florida State.
Okay. And so was it common for you to send emails like this essentially on her behalf?
Yes.
Page 3 of State's Exhibit 50, is this in fact the contract that was attached to that email?
Yes.
Do you recall receiving this back from Ms. Nachtman?
Yes.
And do you recall when you received it back, if you sent it on August the 19th at around 11:30 a.m.?
I received the scanned copy of the contract after 5 o'clock on the 19th, and so I had already left for the day and did not process it until the following morning.
Okay. And at the top of the email, we see a date and time of August the 19th at 5:28 p.m. Does that appear to be correct to you as to when you received the scanned contract back?
Yes.
Okay. And you said that you processed it the next morning, which would have been the morning of August the 20th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. In the notes that you reviewed and that you've spoken about here today, you indicated that FSU received phone calls in July and then in August from Nicole Nachtman. Did your records ever indicate that you received any calls from a Miriam Deans?
No.
Ms. Gilbert, I'm just going to show you State's Exhibit 40. Does this, do you recognize this?
Yes.
Okay, and what do you recognize this to be?
It is a fall 2015, spring 2016 housing contract.
And is this the same contract that we saw in State's Exhibit 50, just sorted by itself?
I believe so.
Your Honor, this time state we're moving out in State's Exhibit 40.
It'll be admitted.
Okay, and I'm showing you this here. Do you recognize this to be the same contract that she signed, or that was attached to the prior email that we just looked at?
Yes.
Okay. Towards the bottom, we see emergency contact information filled in. Would all of this information have been filled out by Nicole Nachtman herself?
Yes.
Okay, and then sent back to your office?
Yes.
In addition to the contract, was there another item that Ms. Nachtman would have had to send in to secure her place?
She would have needed to pay a $100 deposit to solidify her contract before we could assign her to a space.
And when you say assign her to a space, does that also include assign her to overflow?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall whether or not that deposit was sent in?
It was.
Okay. And do you recall when it was sent in?
It was sent in shortly after we received, or after I processed the contract, the morning of the 20th, because I believe she received her assignment later in the afternoon.
Later in the afternoon of the 20th, she received her assignment?
I believe so.
And when you say received her assignment, you mean like she was told the specific room or whatever that she would be assigned to?
Yes.
Okay. At the time that you received this scanned contract back, do you know if the deposit had been paid at that point yet, or if it was after that?
It was after that. Our fiscal staff needed to put the deposit on Ms. Nachtman's account before or after we received the contract.
Thank you, Ms. Gilbert. I'll pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, Ms. Gilbert.
Hello.
Now, you had indicated the way housing worked when you worked there back in August of 2015. Upperclassmen had pretty much priority or different deadlines, let's say, than an incoming freshman would for housing.
Yes.
For an upperclassman or somebody in Ms. Nachtman's position returning would have been in January of 15 to have their housing contract or paperwork in and secured by that point. Is that correct?
Yes.
And typically, obviously, common sense tells us that upperclassmen have priority over freshmen if they're returning to campus housing.
Yes.
And that's the reason for the different deadlines.
Yes.
And as far as your records show, Ms. Nachtman was in fact an upperclassman and was returning to Florida State Housing that fall term of August of 2015.
Yes.
Now, an upperclassman like Ms. Nachtman would have received some type of email notification from housing before the January 15 deadline to let her know, if you plan on coming back, this is what you need to do, or this is the deadline.
Yes.
So that's typically common if you've lived in housing before, or if as in Ms. Nachtman's position, you send out kind of that deadline so she knows when she needs to get her paperwork in.
Yes.
But as far as the records you reviewed, the first contact Ms. Nachtman makes with housing to find out or to inquire whether she has something available is July of 15.
Correct.
So she's now almost 7 months past that January deadline. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And I'm going to show you States 50. Can you see that?
Yes.
And so the reason we know the July date is when she called is that call note that lists on July 13th of 15 at 1:06 p.m. somebody with the housing office logged in a phone call. And again, we know it's Nicole Nachtman because I guess this is her account. You
Yes.
see her name up at the top, right?
Yes.
And this is all part of you all's housing computer system, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that July date and how we now know it was July when she first inquires is because that's what this activity log appears to show.
Correct.
So by July, she's already 7 months past the deadline to get a housing assignment.
Yes.
And then I believe that same document I just showed you doesn't show any other communications or contact until August 19th. And let me put that back up, I'm sorry, states 50. The next call indicates she calls back about a month later, a little more than a month, to see what's going on, what's with her housing situation. And she's advised at that time that there still isn't an assignment.
Correct.
And that would have been August 19th, and it's logged in about 11:15 in the morning.
Yes.
Then it appears later on the 19th, and according to this call log, at 11:31 is when an email is sent to her from you indicating that there's now at least an overflow spot for her.
Correct.
And this overflow process is literally a moment-to-moment thing. You'd agree?
Yes.
Okay. So you literally, the student, as soon as you find out, as you did in this situation, that your supervisor has given you 5 spots in overflow, as soon as you find that out, you try and notify the student, because this is move-in week.
Yes.
Typically.
The 19th was the day that the halls had opened.
So this is literally a moment-to-moment. I'm assuming housing is, it's very fluid. People are backing out, students are deciding not to come, and literally at any given moment you could find out, I have a spot now I can offer this student.
Correct.
And that's what happened here, it appears, on the 19th, because not even 16 minutes later is when the email sent, oh, we have a spot.
Yes.
Okay. And it wasn't a phone call, it was done via email.
Correct.
So you have to assume that that person or the student isn't going to get the notification until they access their email, versus a phone call where you're calling them immediately.
Yes.
Now, you indicated that the housing deposit to secure the contract at the time was $100.
Correct.
And isn't it in fact true that the housing records that you've reviewed in Ms. Nachtman's file indicate she actually requested a reduction in the deposit to $75?
Correct.
And that was granted to her.
Yes.
And then once so the contract isn't secured until that payment is received and processed through finance and all that.
Correct.
So while Ms. Nachtman got the notification on the 19th at 11:30 or so, I have a space, it doesn't mean that that space is secured until the money exchanges hands and is processed at the Florida State Housing Unit.
Correct.
And so the final assignment, payment received, you have a spot, occurs on August 20th at 2:55 p.m.
Correct.
And I think Ms. Derry asked you this. In nowhere in Ms. Nachtman's file, housing, or anything did you see any communications at any point from her mom asking about housing or payments from mom, Miriam Deans, or anything like that?
I did not.
You can have a moment.
Yes.
I want to show you States 40, which is the actual contract, where there appears to be a signature by Nicole Nachtman on, it looks like the 19th of August, and then there's a spot for a parent or guardian, and that's blank.
Correct.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you, Judge.
Redirect?
Just very briefly, Judge. Ms. Gilbert, I wanted to ask you about something in this email. Apologize if I've asked before. This document right here in the first communication, FLPPD, what does that stand for?
Florida Prepaid Dormitory Plan. I think yeah, that's correct.
So the indication was that Nicole Nachtman had Florida prepaid and needed to be on campus.
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further, Judge.
May this witness be excused by the state
Yes, sir.
and by the defense?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down. You may be excused as a witness at this time. I'll ask the state to call your next witness.
Christina Chiodi.
Christina Chiodi. Ms. Chiodi, good afternoon. If you'll come forward, be sworn wherever you're comfortable. If you'll face me and raise your right hand, please. Thank you. Do you swear or affirm any testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God? All right, if you'll follow the bailiff around to the ramp that leads up to the witness chair, please watch your step. When you get to the chair, go ahead and have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. If you need to put something down, that's fine. And that microphone is adjustable.
Okay.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
I'm Christina Chiodi, Chiodi,
Thank you. Where are you currently living?
in Tallahassee, Florida.
Okay. And are you a student there or are you working there?
I'm currently a medical student there.
Okay. I want to turn your attention back to August of 2015. Were you enrolled at Florida State at that time?
Yes, as an undergraduate.
Okay. And at that time in August of 2015, were you also working at Florida State in some capacity?
Yes, as a resident assistant.
What does a resident assistant do?
A resident assistant is a student employee of university housing at FSU. And our job is really to be accessible and present for the residents that live within our assigned hall. We prepare the rooms before they get to FSU. We facilitate the check-in process. And again, we're present throughout the year until they check out at the end of the year.
In August of 2015, what resident hall were you assigned to?
Smith Hall.
Do you recall having contact with an individual by the name of Nicole Nachtman in August of 2015?
I checked her into the building at Smith Hall.
Okay. Do you recall what date that was that you checked her in?
I don't recall the date, but I know it was a Friday.
Okay. Friday in August. When you checked her in that Friday in August, what was going on that week at Florida State?
It was just a check-in week. New students were arriving to campus, and as they came in, we just were checking them into the building so they could get all moved in for the year.
Had classes started yet at that point?
No,
When were classes scheduled to start as it related to that week?
the following Monday.
Okay. So classes would have started the following Monday. The week before, was that a pretty common week for check-in and moving into dorms to take place?
That's the only week for people to begin to move in, yeah.
Okay. Had you ever had contact with Nicole Nachtman prior to that Friday?
No,
Okay. Did you know her at all prior to that?
no,
Ever worked with her as a resident assistant in any other hall?
no.
Your role on that Friday at Smith Hall, was it, you described a resident assistant's role, were you primarily assigned to be checking students in at that time?
Yes, I was assigned the morning check-in duty, which essentially consists of giving them paperwork to fill out, going over the rules and regulations of living on campus, and then giving them access to their assigned room.
Were you the first contact person to give these students access to that hall?
Yes.
Okay. Prior to making contact with you, students who are going to be living in that hall, would they have had access to the hall through a key or a card?
I'm not entirely sure. They might be able to use their FSU ID to swipe in. For some students that doesn't work, so we have to open the door. Normally during check-in week we have the door open and they come to the check-in desk and then they get their key to their actual room.
Okay. And your contact with Nicole Nachtman on that Friday, tell us what that consisted of, what you recall about that.
It was relatively brief. The check-in process isn't really a laborious thing. I had her fill out some forms and then again went over the rules of the building and then gave her her key. It was like any other check-in that I had conducted throughout the week.
And you say you were assigned to morning check-in duties, is
Yes.
that right? So during what hours were you checking students in?
Between 8 and 12, 8 and 1, somewhere.
Do you recall about what time it was that you had contact with Miss Nachtman on that Friday morning?
It was somewhere earlier in my shift. I want to say probably around like 9:30 or so.
If I showed you a calendar from August of 2015, would that refresh your recollection as to the date?
Probably yes.
If you could take a look at that calendar.
It would have been the 21st.
Okay, and after looking at the calendar, does that refresh your memory as to what date it was that you had contact with her?
Yes,
And what date was it?
the 21st of August.
Okay. You said it was about 9 a.m. that you checked her in, you believe.
Yeah.
Was she alone when you checked her in?
Yes.
Do you recall if she had anything with her?
I'm not entirely sure. I don't remember.
Do you recall anything notable about her demeanor?
No, like I said, it was just like any other check-in. Everything seemed fairly normal.
Do you recall if she was crying?
No.
No, she was not, or no, you don't recall?
No, she was not crying. Sorry.
And where do you recall that you checked her into? What was going to be her assigned room?
She was assigned an overflow space. It would have been 01 as the ending numbers. I want to say that it was 801, but it's been quite a few years, so I'm not entirely sure.
Okay. Thank you. I'll pass the witness then.
Cross-examination?
Good afternoon, Ms. Chiodi.
Good afternoon.
Now, the hall that you were working on the morning of August 21st when you had contact with Ms. Nachtman was Smith Hall.
Smith Hall, yes.
And for students, because you worked in housing, who hadn't secured either housing in time or maybe were low on the list as far as priority, would be assigned what's called overflow housing, which is the temporary housing until a permanent place can be found, correct?
Yes, and also sometimes the overflow housing, if no vacancies open up throughout campus, that will be converted into their permanent living situation.
So that could have been possible depending on whether students withdraw or there's adequate space available.
Right, it just depends on the students that had the secured housing. Once they checked in, if there were any vacancies, then housing would then further move them to.
In Smith Hall, where you were working that day, the actual assigned overflow housing was really like a lounge that had been converted with bunk beds and dressers. Is that your recollection?
Yes,
And that's the area where Ms. Nachtman had been assigned.
yes,
Typically, upperclassmen have priority in on-campus housing if they're returning to on-campus housing, right?
correct. If they submit their appropriate documentation in time, yes.
In fact, you found it strange that when you looked up or saw that Ms. Nachtman was an upperclassman, that she didn't have an assigned spot, that instead she had this overflow assignment.
Right.
Because either sophomores or juniors or seniors, if you've lived on campus before, you would have typically had priority, assuming you got your paperwork in and did what you were supposed to do.
Right. Normally, the certain timeline, because the new incoming students would get admitted later in the year, so upperclassmen would have the opportunity to submit their paperwork in prior to new students even getting accepted.
And then your actual space for housing isn't secured until they receive your deposit and it's processed.
Yes, and you receive a priority number accordingly.
Now, the process at the time, back in August of 2015, by which a student would be notified of their assignment or whether they got overflow housing, would have been through, I guess there was something called a housing portal,
Yes.
where it would have your roommate information and it would notify you of an assignment if there was one and things like that.
Yes.
And each student, I'm assuming, who has housing has one of these accounts or portals they can access.
Yes.
You indicated you recall Ms. Nachtman coming on that Friday the 21st at about 9 in the morning.
Yes.
You said she was by herself.
Yes.
And the check-in process is obviously I'm assuming you have a roster or forms of people for Smith Hall in front of you. And you look at their ID and you verify this whole check-in, that this is the person checking in and what their assignment is.
Right.
So there's an actual, I guess, verification process when someone checks in where you can document when you made contact with them, whether you verified their ID, and told them where they were going to be living.
We have a roster with all of their names, and we have an area where they sign, and then they fill out an information card about themselves, and then any allergies, things like that, and then they sign a commitment to community, which are agreeing to all the rules and regulations of living within the building.
And that would have all happened with Ms. Nachtman at 9 in the morning on the 21st. This check-in
Approximately,
process
yes.
you described. Now, at first, you couldn't locate her name on the roster. Do you remember that?
Yes, that morning I had been given a sticky note with a couple of names that had been added to different overflow spaces, so I had handwritten on the roster about 3 or so names, and Ms. Nachtman's name was one of them.
So you had your printed roster, which I'm assuming are all the people that got their stuff in on time.
Right.
And then, because housing's so fluid and it's a moment-to-moment thing where somebody may back out or you may make an assignment, Ms. Nachtman wasn't even on the actual printed roster. You had been told either by somebody in housing or a supervisor, we've offered her a space, so handwrite her in, basically.
Yes.
You remember Ms. Nachtman being quiet and reserved.
Yes.
And after that brief contact at 9 in the morning to check her in, you never saw her again.
I was later taken down to the police station to be questioned, and while I was there, she was also there.
Okay,
Aside from that, though, no.
But no contact
No,
as far as
no.
conversations or
No.
anything. I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Redirect.
No redirect, Judge.
May this witness be excused by the state
Yes, sir.
and by the defense.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down. You may be excused as a witness at this time.
Thank you.
I'll ask the state to call your next witness.
Gale Berghorn?
Gale Berghorn.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
If I could have you raise your right hand, thank you. Do you swear or affirm any testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. If you'll follow the bailiff around to the ramp that leads up to the witness stand, please watch your step. When you get to the chair, go ahead and have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. That microphone does adjust if necessary. You may proceed.
Thank you. Could you please state your, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Gale A. Berghorn, Berghorn.
All right, Ms. Berghorn, are you employed?
I am.
And where are you employed?
I work for a government consulting company called Sava Workforce Solutions, who has a contract with the DEA Digital Forensics Lab, SFL9. I work in their Utah lab.
Okay, and how long have you been employed in that position?
Approximately 4 years.
Prior to that, were you employed with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement here in Tampa?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and in what capacity?
I was a digital forensics criminal lab analyst.
Okay. How long were you employed as a digital forensics criminal lab analyst?
Approximately 4 years.
Tell us, if you could, about your background as it pertains to digital forensics. How long have you been employed in the field involving digital forensics?
I started working in digital forensics in 2011, where I took an intensive 1-year training with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, where I took internal and external trainings in digital forensics, read books, took tests, did proficiencies, competencies to learn how to do digital forensics. From there, I worked for FDLE for approximately 3 years, doing examinations on all different kinds of digital forensics, digital media, computers, cell phones, laptops, cameras, thumb drives. And from there, I went to Utah to work in a DEA laboratory.
Okay. Tell us about your educational background.
I have a bachelor's in biology and about over 30 years of experience in the computer industry.
The 30 years of experience in the computer industry, is that from education or employment? Explain that.
I was a systems administrator and IT manager for a nonprofit.
Tell us about the training that you received at FDLE as a part of your employment in digital forensics.
After the 1 year intensive training that I took, I also took yearly trainings in cell phones and forensic tools that we use. And while I work for DEA, I also take yearly trainings in different certifications and different types of forensic tools that I use.
Have you, or whether that was it or whether there's been additional, have you received specialized training in digital and evidence and digital forensics?
Yes, I just recently, in 2018, took a training with the SANS training for Windows digital forensics.
Okay. And had you, I guess, during your time at FDLE, while you did digital forensics, did you also receive specialized training just in that field?
In digital forensics?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. During your time when you were employed both at Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and I guess in your current capacity, but more so when you were at FDLE, were you required as a part of your employment to stay up to date on current literature and technology in that area?
Yes, we were.
And were you required to do continuing education as it pertained to that field?
Yes, and we also had competencies and proficiencies every year to make sure that we were up to date with our techniques.
Did you hold any certifications in that area?
I currently hold 3 certifications. One is the International Association for Computer Investigative Specialists, IASIS. I have a certification of digital forensics with them, and I'm also a peer coach for students who are trying to attain that certification. I have one through NCASE, which is NCASE is a digital forensics software that is used to perform digital forensics on different types of media, and I have my SANS certification. It's called the GCFE, GIAC Computer Forensic Examiner certification.
Tell us about your duties and responsibilities on a day-to-day basis when you were employed at FDLE as a digital forensics analyst.
My primary responsibility was to be assigned work, cases, where I would get the cases from the evidence intake section, take them back to my office, and perform digital forensics examinations on them, primarily on computers, cell phones, thumb drives, SD cards, cameras, anything that would be considered digital media. Extract that information and preserve it, prepare it to the investigators in a format that they could read, and then archive the information.
When you say extract the information, preserve it, and prepare it in a format or manner that they could read, did you take part in like altering or changing the evidence?
No, the information was extracted out and put into like a PDF format, Excel, but no changes were made to the date information.
The lab work that you did for FDLE, was it accredited?
Yes, the FDLE lab at the time was accredited with the ASCLD lab certification. That's the American Association of Crime Laboratory Directors lab. It's an international certification to verify that the lab is following the SOPs, the standard operation procedures that it has set up.
And have you previously testified in court regarding your work in the area of digital evidence or digital forensics?
Yes, this is my 4th time testifying.
And I would ask if the defense has any questions in this area. No, sir.
All right, you may proceed.
As part of your job at FDLE, and I think you've told us a little bit about it, but tell us about what types of evidence you receive to analyze and work with.
Computers, laptops, cell phones, digital cameras, thumb drives, SD cards, micro SD cards, all sorts, anything that can be stored electronically.
And how is it that you actually analyze these items? Tell us like what you would do. We'll start with the cell phone. What would you do when you received a cell phone?
When I received the case from my supervisor, I would go to the evidence intake section, and from there they would change the chain of custody over to me. I had an office where I could lock the door, so the evidence was securely stored in that office From there, I would examine the evidence, because it's always contained either in a bag or manila envelope or some sort of sealed container. From there, I would take pictures of the container, making sure that there was no rips or tears to see that it's completely sealed. I would then open it up, verify that I had evidence in there, again taking pictures if it was still sealed in another envelope. After I got the evidence out, I would make sure that it was not damaged, or if it was damaged, it was documented. Take pictures of it, make sure that I'm looking at the correct piece of evidence as is stated in the case form that I'm given. At that point, I would then identify the evidence with my initials and the exhibit number, taking pictures of that, and then from there, I would decide how to proceed with the examination.
Okay. As a digital forensics analyst, are you familiar with the facts of the case?
No.
Okay. Do you take any role in determining what items that you're extracting are relevant to a particular case?
No.
Do you take any role in modifying or changing that evidence prior to turning it over to law enforcement?
No.
I want to turn your attention specifically to FDLE case number 2015-0102-174 involving a subject by the name of Nicole Nachtman. Were you involved in that case as a digital forensics analyst?
Yes.
When did you become involved in that case?
I became involved in the case when the case was assigned to me by my supervisor.
And do you recall approximately when that was?
Your Honor, may I check my notes?
To refresh your recollection, yes, you may.
Thank you. I was assigned the case on November 6th, 2015.
Okay. And at that time when you were assigned the case in November 6th of 2015, did you actually receive evidence at that time or on a later date?
That's when I took custody of the evidence.
Okay. Where was the evidence?
The evidence was stored at the FDLE regional office in Tampa, Florida, and it was in the evidence intake section.
When the evidence is stored at that location, is it stored in a secure manner?
Yes, it is.
And when you take custody of it, is it always documented who at FDLE might have custody of it?
Yes, we have a laboratory management system that keeps track of where the evidence is located, and I actually have to digitally sign for the evidence.
Okay, and you already told us that when you have the evidence in your office locks, and so then it is secured in that manner. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. What is it that you actually received in this case?
A cell phone.
Do you recall what type of cell phone?
If I can refer to my notes.
It'll help refresh your recollection.
Yes. It was an LG Optimus F60 cellular phone.
Okay. And do you recall if it contained anything within that cell phone?
It contained a SIM card and a micro SD card.
Is that common?
Yes, it is.
When you received this item, tell us how was it packaged, what condition was it in?
It was packaged in a brown envelope, and then it was also packaged in a unsealed plastic envelope and or a bag, and it was damaged. The screen was shattered.
Okay. When you say an unsealed plastic bag, was that inside of the manila or brown envelope?
Yes, that was sealed.
Okay. And the manila or brown envelope?
Yes, the manila envelope was sealed.
Ms. Berghorn, I'm showing you what's been pre-marked for identification in State's Exhibit 42. Without showing the contents of that to the jury, if you could take a look inside that packaging and look at the items inside there, and let us know if you recognize markings on those.
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize markings on those?
I have my date and initials on the envelope.
Okay. And the actual item inside there, do you recognize that to be the cell phone that you work on?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So you've indicated to us that you received one LG cell phone and that was the item that you then later performed the extraction that you tell us about as a part of your regular duties on. Was this in fact the cell phone that you performed that extraction on?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So tell us, when you received that specific cell phone, what exactly do you do?
Well, once I received the phone, I take pictures of it because it was damaged. I made that note that it was damaged, and from there, I made sure that the phone was fully charged so I could use two cell phone forensic software tools to extract information from it. I used a industry standard tool called Cellbrite to do a physical image of the hard drive, not the hard drive, but the cell phone, and then magnetic forensics internet evidence finder to find additional information.
Tell us, what is Cellbrite?
Cellbrite is a mobile device extraction software where you can hook up different types of phones and it will extract the information out of that phone.
Is this a program that you've received training on?
Yes, it is.
Program that you've used before?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And the second thing you said was an internet evidence finder?
Yeah, magnetic forensics internet evidence finder is a forensic tool that you can use on mobile devices, and it extracts out Android artifacts.
Was this phone an Android phone?
Yes.
So is that program specific to use with phones that have Android?
Magnetic forensics internet evidence software is used on hard drives and cell phones and Apple phones.
Okay. So you can use it on other types of phones?
Yes,
too?
you can.
All right. Is that a program that you're familiar with and that you've received training on?
Yes, it is.
A program that you've also used before?
Yes, it is.
Okay. During your utilization of these two programs with this specific phone, did you encounter any bugs or glitches?
No, I did not.
And about how long did the download or extraction with those programs take in this case?
I can't tell you an exact time. I made no notes that it was time that was not. There was no unusual time in extracting the information.
Okay. Is it common that it takes a long time to take the information out of the phone?
For some phones, it is.
Okay. And I guess we should say, what is a common amount of time that it would take to extract on a phone like this?
For this type of a phone, it might take a couple of hours.
Okay. When the information is extracted, and I guess was Cellbrite the program that you used first?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So we'll talk about Cellbrite first. When the information is extracted with Cellbrite, are you able to read that information or to view it?
Yeah, Cellbrite parses out or breaks out the information by it takes like all the emails, all the text messages, all the location information, the calendar information, contacts, things like that, and puts them into different categories so you can then look at each different category of information.
Does it also give you information on sort of the basics of the phone, the model of the phone number, like serial number, things like that?
Yes, it will give you the device information.
And are you able to use that information to sort of cross-reference it back to the actual phone itself to make sure it's all in fact the same?
Correct. I had taken pictures and had already identified from the information from the phone physically from it being stamped on the back of the phone under the battery. So I was able to take a look at that information and compare it to what Cellbrite had identified the phone as.
Okay. Then after Cellbrite, is that when you next went to the, and I keep saying it wrong, but the Internet Evidence Finder program?
Yes, I used that as a secondary software.
And why do you use two?
One tool never extracts all the information out. And I like Internet Evidence Finder because it presents the information to the investigators in a readable format.
And same thing with that download or extraction. Are you able to kind of cross-reference it and ensure that the document or version that it's giving you to read the information matches up to the phone itself?
Yes, I do.
And this extraction that's taking place with these two programs, are you manually doing anything, or are you just kind of watching it to confirm it's pulling it out correctly?
Well, with Cellbrite, you actually connect the phone via cable to the computer that has the Cellbrite software. And that software will access the phone and extract the information out.
Okay. And what about with the Internet Evidence Finder?
Internet Evidence Finder works the same way. It identifies the phone and then it extracts the information out of it.
After both of those extractions are complete through both of those programs, what happens next?
Once that's done, I then start generating the reports for the investigators.
Okay. When you say generating the reports for investigators, what do you mean by that?
Take an instance of Cellbrite identifying the text messages. I do believe for this particular case, I generated text messages in a PDF format and also in an Excel format for their viewing.
And when you say generated, are you creating that, or are you just making it readable? Explain that.
The software will present the text messages, and then you have an option to click on a button that says export, and then at that point you say whether you want a PDF format or an Excel format.
Any of the information that you exported or put in a PDF or Excel format, did you modify or change it in any way?
No, I did not.
At that point, is it then that you're sort of putting it in the you're preparing your report for law enforcement? Do you ultimately turn over a disk to law enforcement?
Yes, I do.
And does that disk contain everything that you've described from those different software programs?
Yes, it does.
Anything that's contained on it, is it a document that you personally have modified or created, or is it what is coming from the software program?
It's coming from the software program, and we're also putting it on a DVD that's read-only. So really, it can't be modified from the disc itself also.
And is that what a read-only DVD means, that it's not something that can be altered or changed?
It means that you can't write to it once it's been written to.
Ms. Berghorn, I'm showing you what's been pre-marked as State's Exhibit 64 for identification purposes. Prior to now, have you seen this document?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and do you recognize it?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize it?
These are reports that were generated from the Magnetic Forensics Internet Evidence Finder software.
Okay, from the extraction you performed on the LG Optimus phone.
Yes.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of what was generated by the extraction that you performed in November of 2015?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, this time I asked to move into evidence State's Exhibit 64. Can we approach?
Yes. All right, we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break then. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please do not discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Please do not look up anything about the case or be exposed to any media reports about the case. All rise for the jury. We'll take a 10-minute break.